Good afternoon and welcome to the January 27th Civil Service Commission meeting. May I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Abkarian.
Here.
Commissioner Manukian.
Here.
Chair Devine.
Here.
For the record, Commissioner Yakubian and Commissioner Gazarian are absent.
Okay, next item, please.
Minutes for the meeting of December 9.
Move to approve, dispense from reading.
May I have a second?
Second.
Okay, unanimous. Next item, please.
Oral communications.
I have no cards. If there's anybody in the audience that wishes to address the commission, please so state. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next meeting item.
Recruitment and examination report.
Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is your report that we bring each meeting. It shows what activity is occurring with our recruitment process. The report, as you've seen, it's got a little bit of a different look to it, but for the most part, the content is the same. We have the staff members who are assigned. It's listed by department. We have whether the exam is promotional or open, and then whatever dates have been set up for those respective processes. Right now, we have a total of 57 processes in effect, and things really have picked up in the tail end of the calendar year, and because I think our previous meeting we were down to about 50, but a lot of activity and things for the staff to be doing. And you'll note some of these processes are some significant ones, including the fire recruit and a few others that we anticipate lots of work. So anyway, this is a note and file item. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them for you.
Okay. Any questions? Seeing none, we'll take the next item, please.
Eligible list established. And
Mr. Doyle, please.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is the eligible list that has been established since our last meeting, which was December the 9th of 2015. As I was saying, a lot of activities, particularly towards the tail end of the calendar year. These are lists, as I always say, it's the culmination of the recruitment process. Once we finish, this is what we end up with. If you see in the far right column, you have the total number of people who make the list from each of these various processes. During this period of time, again, it's approximately a month and a half over the holidays as well. Staff has created 27 eligible lists, which is almost unbelievable, but it is what it is. But of those lists, you see 19 of them were promotional processes, 5 were open processes. The open ones always have the larger candidate pools. 2 that were promotional and open, and 1 that was a reinstatement, which, if you recall from our last meeting, we had the reinstatement list. So anyway, again, this is a note and file item. If you have any questions about any of these processes, I'd be happy to try and answer them for you.
Any questions? I do have a couple on these open exams where you have 104 candidates or applications and 6 make the list, or 119 and 4 make the list. What's the primary reason for the huge disparity in the applicants versus the ones that make the list?
Well, Chair Devine, members of the Commission, it's simply a function of the process. Typically, with those large recruitments, we have a screening initially to make sure the candidates meet the minimum requirements. So that's a review of the applications itself, and we lose a good number of people on that because sometimes people apply for jobs that they don't meet the minimum qualifications. Then if we're still left with a large group of 50 or 60 candidates, we'll in all likelihood do some sort of a written examination. And so we'll do a written examination and try to winnow that down to a smaller number. Usually we'll have those candidates who pass the exam, who score amongst the highest, maybe 10 to 15 candidates will then go on to an oral interview process as well. So it's just like a funnel. It gets narrower and narrower at the tail end, and ultimately it results in a rather extensive, structured oral interview process. And when we put those processes together, we tell the interview panelists that be challenging, ask difficult questions, evaluate the candidates as if you were hiring them for your own company. And if somebody's not up for the job or not suitable, fail them. And from that standpoint, we sometimes do end up with very, very short lists. And so, anyway, if there are any particular that you want to signal out, I think
No, I
do
just
have the staff here.
wondered, just in general, and I think you've explained it very well, and I appreciate that.
Sure.
So with that, we'll move on to the
Let
next.
me just
Oh, I'm
ask
sorry.
one quick question. Matt, do you know how many of the 6 were actually promotional people, how many were open? Do you have an idea?
Which particular recruitment?
The one for 104, let's say, you have 6 candidates eligible list, and it's open and promotional. Out of the 104, how many of the 6 were open? How many were from promotional?
Oh, you're talking about the electrical system
systems,
dispatcher?
yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Nersessian would probably be able to answer that. He did that recruitment. So,
Chair Devine, Mr. Karian, actually none of the 6 candidates were promotional candidates.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Next item, please.
For the record, Commissioner Gazarian has joined this meeting.
Thank you.
Class specification for approval and job bulletin for approval. Deputy Director of Public Works, City Engineer.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, we're asking the Commission's approval on two aspects of this report. The first is a revision of the class specification for this Deputy Director of Public Works / City Engineer. The reason for that is that, as with many functions within this organization, in the last couple of years, we've had to be more efficient and combine and consolidate and work smarter in a lot of ways. And one thing that we did, and this is back when Mr. Galanian was the incumbent in this position, the Deputy Director, City Engineer, we had a few retirements back in a retirement process. We had some layoffs and such, but back in 2012, we took the traffic and transportation function and consolidated that within the already existing engineering department. If some of you recall, Mr. Begdanian, who was formerly our traffic and transportation administrator, after he retired, we lumped that all together within the engineering department and put that under Mr. Galanian in engineering. So as Mr. Galanian vacated that job to take the big job, we're now at the point where we're ready to fill this position. And before we go out, we want to make sure that the traffic engineering element is contained within the job duties. So really, at this point, pretty much all the engineering throughout the city, but for building and safety and those within GWP, is going to be within this section of our Public Works Department. So we now need this specification to reflect that. Additionally, we're seeking your approval for the job bulletin, which we intend to post pretty much after approval. And again, not all job bulletins do have to come before the Commission, but when we've done a recruitment previously on a promotional basis and we're seeking to do it on an open basis, we then would bring it for the Commission's approval. And Mr. Galanian has had discussions with his staff, any prospective candidates internally, and I don't want to speak for him, but there are no concerns internally with doing that. There are some, we believe, some really outstanding candidates, but again, at least one of them is very close to retirement, and I'm not sure about the other one, but essentially we've run this by the department and the internal candidates, as well as our Glendale Management Association, and they're fine with an open recruitment on this.
Just a quick comment. I think Mr. Galanian needs additional resources. This is a step in the right direction because he has a phenomenal department, and with everything that they have to work with. I mean, how long has it been that this position has been vacant?
Since August of 2012, is that correct?
I think he deserves a raise.
It's not within your purview, sir.
Well,
Whatever is the difference, Sam will cover.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. That position became available upon my appointment to the Director of Public Works on July 1st, 2014.
Thank you. You guys are doing a phenomenal job
Thank you very much.
for everything.
Any other questions? I have a couple. I was wondering why the building and safety segment is left out this time. I know a while back we had put it in because there were people in the building and safety department that had the licensing and the knowledge and the skills to be able to compete for this position. I'm wondering what happened in the interim that we're taking it out now.
Mr. Chair, essentially that division, the engineering division within Department of Public Works does not handle building and safety related work. And most of the organizations or my counterparts in other cities, very similar to our setup. That's the only reason.
Let's say that a person in building and safety today, again, has the license and has worked in some of these areas maybe before they got into building and safety. Would they be eligible to take the exam on the open?
Yes, Mr. Chair, as long as they have the knowledge of water engineering, civil engineering, traffic engineering, or similar related topics, they will qualify to apply.
Are you thinking of getting back into the industry?
It crossed
Do
my
you need an
mind.
assistant?
It crossed my mind. Okay, that's all I had. Any other questions?
Move to approve?
Second.
We have unanimous consent? Unanimous consent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Next item, please.
For the record, Commissioner Yakubian has joined the meeting. Class specification for approval, Senior DNA Specialist.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is a revision of the existing class specification series, the DNA group within our police department. With this action, we're proposing to do something we rarely do, and that's reduce an educational requirement for the position. And when we opened the crime lab here at our police department, we had extremely high hopes, high expectations, and we still do for making sure that that is staffed in an appropriate fashion with highly qualified individuals. One of the key positions, however, within the series, the Senior DNA Specialist, as we originally drew this up, we had a master's degree educational requirement. And unfortunately, we believe that that has limited our candidate pool. And we have recent evidence to support that. In fact, the previous report on the eligible lists that have been established is evidence to that we did a recruitment for this December and January. We had candidates as far as the screening process. We had a total of 43 candidates, I believe, and only 8 met the minimum requirements of that master's degree. And these were 8 people scattered all throughout the country. I mean, that's how challenging this was to fill. And ultimately, we were, as poor Russ was doing this recruitment, he was having to deal with potentially, bringing in out-of-town candidates to interview. And we talked about teleconferencing some of the interviews and doing them over the phone. And as things happened, we had half of the candidates who met the eligibility ended up dropping out for one reason or another, and we ended up interviewing 4, and of the 4, only 1 passed our interview process. And then
So Russ was involved with this. That's what it was.
she was.
Thank you, Russ.
But unfortunately, that one candidate has since chosen to waive or withdraw from the process. So we're now
Even
left
that one?
the one. Yes. So now we're kind of back at square one, and we had discussion with Deputy Chief Povolitis and the folks over in the lab, and we thought that perhaps if we remove that master's degree requirement, it would help expand our pool a bit. So that's what we're seeking to do. If the commission will approve this, we are going to go out again right away and try this one more time. And I think we have some evidence to believe that we would be able to attract a sufficient number of candidates with that modified educational requirement. So with that, Commission has any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them. Chief Povolitis is here, as is Mr. Kwan.
I actually have a question. Under the DNA series, it still has a master's degree is desirable, but then under the senior DNA specialist, it's removed. I just want to know why it's that way.
Chair Devine, Commissioner Yakubian, when you have the series, what you have are your listing of the definition, the essential functions, and the experience and educational requirements that applies to all of the jobs within that series. And then as you advance up the occupational series, the requirements in education get a little more specific. So where the change was actually made was on page 24, where under the senior DNA specialist, again, that's the position we're trying to fill, where it used to say under education a master's degree from an accredited college or university, so on and so forth. That's being removed, and it's going to fall back to just a bachelor's degree. So,
Right, but my question
with
would
the
be...
master's preferred.
Right, so my question would be, why would you not then include desirable but not necessary as it is in the requirements?
Because it is...
In the next level, which is, I'm imagining the higher level, the supervisor. It says that a master's degree is required. So then in the level below it, wouldn't it make sense to have master's degree desirable if that's something that is desirable?
It still does apply. If you look back to page 22 of the education/training,
right.
That applies to all three positions. Well, in this case, it's to the two, since a master's degree is required for the supervisor. But where it says on page 22, a master's degree or higher from an accredited college or university is desirable, that applies to basically everything within the series until you get to the supervisor, where it becomes a requirement. I'm sorry, it's confusing.
I guess for me, it just makes more sense to have, to include and desirable on page 24 under the senior DNA specialist. But I understand what you're saying.
That's a requirement. The 24, you have to have it. It's not desirable. It's a mandatory requirement.
No, I'm talking about the senior.
Oh.
And when we post this bulletin, it will still say desirable, based on what it says on page 22. All that gets carried over, unless there's a more higher requirement level.
I don't want to belabor the point, but it just seems to me that I understand you're saying is the general includes it, the specifics don't, but usually the specific is more specific than the general, so it's a little counterintuitive. I don't know if that made any sense.
No, I understand. I had the same question, but then I went back and read the first part and kind of came to the same conclusion that Matt just explained. Do you want to explore it any further? Or no? Okay. Any other questions on that one?
And when I don't mean to interrupt, but when the bulletin is posted, it will still say master's degree desirable. So we're not going to lose that verbiage.
Okay, Commissioner Gazarian.
Thank you. I had occasion to do some homework as to this agenda item, and I came upon posting by the city of Glendale that was made sometime in late 2015, opening date of September 14, 2015, with a closing date of 11/13/2015. It was a senior DNA specialist position. I don't recall this coming to us. It may have. So I got a little confused as to how are these series different than that bulletin that was out September through November of 2015. Is it any different?
No, Chair Devine, Commissioner Gazarian, we construct the bulletins based on what's contained in the specifications that come before you.
This was essentially on Google in the public domain. Was this something that we solicited and got feedback, got applications for this job bulletin?
We did.
Okay.
As I was saying earlier, we just concluded a recruitment for this very position, and were essentially unsuccessful.
Okay. Now, having heard you say that, in reviewing the materials as to this agenda item, I have a couple of questions. One, there's special conditions listed on page 23, top portion of the page.
Okay.
Where it talks about within 4 months of employment, all employees of the police department are required to live within a radius of 60 contiguous miles, land miles of the Glendale Civic Center. Is this as to the DNA series, or is this something generally that applies to all police personnel?
It was page
23, yes.
Specialist, right? But
We'll have the Deputy Chief
Carl
Police
Povolitis, Deputy Police Chief. Commissioner Gazarian, that's something that applies to all Glendale police personnel.
I thought so. Right. Okay. All right. So it's not. We're not saying these people have to be within 60 miles.
No.
Others can be further out.
All of our personnel are essential in case of an emergency,
That's
so
what I
everybody's
thought.
required to live within 60 miles.
Very well. Thank you, sir. And with that, I did a bit more research. I noted that in other counties, and I just pulled out one county in particular, in California, County of Alameda, for a description of a DNA technical lead. Now, I don't know if that's the equivalent of our DNA lab director or not. They seem to require, as a minimum requirement, a master's degree in biology, chemistry, or whatnot. Whereas here, our specifications is not about a lab director, from what I understand, correct?
Correct. This, the announcement that you have there from that other jurisdiction would probably be roughly equivalent to our senior DNA specialist, kind of the lead level or advanced level, because we have the DNA specialist, the senior, and then the supervisor. So.
Very well. And then, last but not least, we have in the materials a reference to adherence or having met the standards, and that is what I'm looking at is the bottom of page 22, continuing on to the top of page 23, the very last paragraph of bottom of page 22, which says, in addition to the above listed educational requirements, individuals assigned to the forensic biology unit, and I take that to mean all individuals assigned to the forensic biology unit, regardless of their rank or title, are required to meet the educational standards for DNA analyst or DNA technical leader as detailed in the current revision of the quality assurance standards for forensic DNA testing laboratories issued by the FBI laboratory director. Reading that material, I went and looked at the requirements, and there's much too much of materials available, but I'm curious as to, aside from the American Association of Forensic Laboratories, if we're going to adhere to the guidelines of the FBI director, which appear to have been modified over the years, do we then want to put some latest addition? And how are we going to mandate that those individuals have met those criteria? Because my objective as a citizen in the city of Glendale, and of course as a member of this body, is to be be second to none when we talk about our DNA lab. I was one of the people that was very excited when we embarked on that journey. So I don't know if there's any light that can be shed on I'm more confusion than anything else.
I can use the term, we'll try to enhance the quagmire a little bit.
Okay.
We are required to meet the FBI standards. We are an accredited laboratory. In order to do DNA testing and to enter that information into the national database, we must meet the FBI requirement standards. The basic information in these job bulletins and the basic requirements are in conformance with that. Our personnel also get continuing education training along the way. They attend the conferences, so that keeps us in compliance with any changes that come out, and that language in the job specification makes sure that we have the ability to screen candidates so that we make sure if there is a change mid-year or somewhere, then it changes up, that we can make sure that they match up.
And though this question may be beyond the scope of this agenda item, but it is related to the lab itself, based on my research, it seems that labs are required to undergo, at a minimum quarterly, if I'm not mistaken, maintenance or...
We have an internal quality assurance program.
Right.
We right now, as a newer lab by our own choice, go through an annual audit.
Okay.
And then your accreditation is good for, I believe it's 5 years, but then you have to have outside auditors come in from the accreditation company, and they could go through all of your paperwork, all of your files, to make sure that you are in compliance with those FBI standards. It is a very, very rigorous standard that we have to meet, and we do comply with.
Are we sending any of our personnel to Virginia, to Quantico, or elsewhere for these purposes? Or?
In fact, our lab director is back there at a working conference right now on the tails of the blizzard. No, we've developed a very good reputation nationally, and we do send our personnel out to those various conferences to stay abreast of it, because the other thing is DNA is constantly changing. There are new standards that are coming in.
Thank you very much.
Put together, the police department put together a group of individuals that did the homework, and I was one of the members of that group. And I remember at the time when we were thinking of doing this and we started the process, we were one of the only ones, besides the sheriffs. My question is, are other departments now moving into this direction? Are we still...
It's a challenging undertaking, so we are actually, for law enforcement agencies, we're one of 3 in LA County. You have LAPD, LA County Sheriffs, and us. The coroners also have a DNA laboratory, but we are one of very few that are doing this.
So nobody else from that period has come on?
Not yet.
I figured. That's fantastic. And keep up the good work. Thank you.
Well, and one of the reasons you see us here is, as I said, there's more demand and more work than we really can accommodate right now, so we need this person on board. Yesterday, actually, but as soon as possible.
Thank you.
I just have one question. The DNA laboratory supervisor, where in the chart does that fit? Is it where it says DNA lab, or is it under the lab, or is not in this chart and I'm missing it?
It's on page 26.
Where does the
right.
DNA laboratory supervisor go?
In this case, right now, it is right underneath. If you see forensic services on the far right, it says crime lab / DNA lab supervisor.
I don't see it.
Okay.
Far right.
So that's the DNA laboratory supervisor.
That's correct.
Is the DNA lab, crime lab DNA. Okay, so this is it right here. Okay. Sorry. You had one more extra word and it confuses the heck out of us, you know?
I have a question, if I may. I was wondering what was the reason for requiring the master's degree originally for this position, and what has changed in the required skill set for this position that you feel it's no longer needed?
When we originally started this, we envisioned a slightly smaller lab in terms of what we were processing. We've been a little bit more successful than we anticipated. So the original plan was to have people being able to be cross-trained as technical leads. And we actually currently have in our lab 3 people with master's degrees. But as we find ourselves currently, we have more work than we can process, and we need someone who can do casework. And so we find ourselves needing to recruit for an experienced DNA analyst who can step right in and do validations and casework now. That could be done with somebody with a master's degree, but it can also be somebody with a bachelor's degree and experience. And as I was trying to describe, we've had more requests for work than we can really accommodate at this point, and so we need an experienced DNA analyst, although we would certainly prefer a master's degree at this point. Somebody with a bachelor's degree and experience who could step in and do casework for us right now is what we're really looking for.
And you're saying because you have 3 others in the operation that have the master's degree, that this position no longer really requires it because you have the backup with the other 3.
Right, and what we're finding in terms of recruiting based on our experience on this last recruitment is that we're going to need the flexibility in order to maintain the staffing and to maintain this enterprise function.
Thank you. Any more questions? Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have unanimous consent. Okay, thank you very much. Next, please.
Job Bulletin for approval, Program Coordinator, Youth Employment Services.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, this is a request for a open bulletin for the position of Program Coordinator, Youth Employment Services, similar to the previous item involving the Deputy Director, city engineer. This is a recruitment that was done previously on a promotional basis, and the department is seeking to have this be an open recruitment process. Once again, it's just an effort to sort of broaden the pool and identify candidates who have the appropriate skill set and background for this particular position. And specifically, they're seeking to find somebody with background in grants and youth employment programs. So once again, this item it was run by our Glendale City Employees Association, and they've expressed no opposition towards this action. So we're therefore requesting an open bulletin on this process.
Okay. I just have one question. How big a net do you spread for these open exams? I know we've talked about 3 of them tonight. Are they just within the city of Glendale, or do you go nationwide, or 7 western states, or what is the protocol on that?
Chair Devine, typically the higher the position, the broader the net you throw. So the Deputy Director of Public Works / City Engineer, I would anticipate advertising throughout the state and perhaps further. And again, we don't necessarily advertise in the old traditional ways of newspapers and things like that. There are websites and professional organizations and social media that you can target directly these individuals. So there's really no boundaries as far as that goes. But a position at this level, I would say the radius would be probably LA County, given the level and given the interest we anticipate.
Very good, thank you. Any questions? Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have unanimous consent. Next item, please.
Reports.
Mr. Chair, we do have the past due performance evaluation reports. Looks like 7 departments that have no past dues, and then a few of the other departments do have some first and second notices, and we do have 1 department with a third notice. City Clerk, Mr. Kasakian, called me earlier and expressed his apologies. He was hoping to be here, but he had another function to attend. But he has assured me that one late evaluation, that's significantly late, he is working on, and he hopes to have it this week.
Any questions?
I have a comment. This has been a project of ours for how many years, Matt? Going back to 2008.
Yeah.
The first, in my opinion, this is what I believe should happen. An employee should not go past 30 days for the first notice, 60 days for the second notice, and 90 days for the third notice. That's how I see it. I don't understand why there should be someone should sit there since August waiting for an employee evaluation. It makes no sense whatsoever. Even if going to October doesn't make any sense. Why would an employee sit since October, going October, November, December, January, going into February now, and they still don't have an evaluation yet? So I think that personally, I would like to look at this maybe next meeting to see if we can change this notices to 30-day notice, 60-day notice, and 90-day notice. That means anyone who misses it in 30 days, 90 days, 60 days, 90 days, they need to anyone who misses it past 90 days, they should just come over. It shouldn't be that we wait August for someone to come in front of the Civil Service Commission to explain why they haven't had an employee evaluation. I would assume that you want to do it right away and get it over with. To wait this long just it's not good for the employees to sit there and wait and find out 6 months later, especially we had one issue in one of the hearings where because the evaluation was late, the disciplinary action came, that we had a whole bunch of other issues. This should be done immediately, and after the 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. 90 days should be the maximum. If anyone hasn't done an evaluation in 90 days, they should come in front of this body and tell us why they haven't been able to, 3 months after it was due, why they haven't been able to do anything.
If I may ask a question, I'm not seeing the August, Commissioner Abkarian. I'm seeing third notices or evaluations with effective dates in September 2015. Does that mean that in August they should have given by the end of August they should have given an evaluation then?
Prior to the evaluation date, and once maybe the first day of the evaluation, you basically call someone and give it to them. Now, if you're 30 days less, I can understand. You're 30 days past the actual date, and that's not a problem. 60 days, I understand. I think that's still reasonable. Something comes up, it's a big department, even though, you look in here for, Public Works has 251, they don't have any late evaluation. So I think once it hits 90 days, I think that's a problem.
The police has 336.
Right, police has 336, they don't have an evaluation, so why should a smaller department have so much problem getting one evaluation done? So I personally recommend, we can't probably discuss it today because it's not a part of the agenda, but I think that we should put this on the next agenda for us to change the first, second notices to 30, 60, 90 days, and then just follow that formula instead of first, second, third notices.
From a due date. For example,
from the due date.
The evaluation is due on September 1st. So
by October 1st, that would be 30 days.
Yeah, it would be 30 days technically, right? But my question also was, Chair Devine, that I don't recall seeing third and fourth notices. I've always seen third notices. It caught my attention that it said third and fourth notices.
There's nothing after third.
But it said third and fourth. So so without really singling out any department or any individual, is this a third notice as to the city clerk's office or a fourth notice?
I believe it's a fourth notice.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, hopefully, I would ask of the chief examiner, that is you, Mr. Doyle, and the chair, Mr. Devine, that if by our next meeting an evaluation has not taken place, our noteworthy servant, the city clerk, should come and tell us why.
Well, I think, not putting words in your mouth, but I think what Mr. Abkarian is asking for is that we change the format a little bit, that we, instead of bringing them in at the third or fourth notice, which in this case was almost 180 days, 6 months later, that we shorten that notice, and that after 90 days is when we ask the department heads what's going on. And I certainly agree with that. So, Mr. Arpetian, do we need to agendize that and to make that change? So I would go along with Mr. Abkarian's suggestion.
Put this on the next agenda so we can discuss it.
Okay, so, thank you. That was a good idea. Okay.
Civil Service Commission staff comments.
Any comments?
I have a comment.
Okay, Mr. Gazarian.
Thank you, Chair Devine. It is my practice from time to time after a Civil Service Commission meeting to revisit and review a previous session on the city's website to learn from and to reflect upon and to improve upon the quality of my service as a commissioner in the city. So I wrote down some notes so that I could make my comments in its entirety and I don't miss anything, because after the commission meeting on December the 9th, I had occasion to review the video recording of our session on or about December 30th, just a day or two before the end of the year. With that review in mind, first and foremost, I would like to extend a public apology to Ms. Stotler, the president of the Glendale Management Association. You may or may not recall she appeared before this commission to be heard and express her concerns about agenda item number 12, which was titled Police Captain Examination, I believe. Police Captain Examination, yes. It was presented by Mr. Doyle, as most agenda items are. After I reviewed the videotape of that session, it became very clear to me and painful that in my zest for fact-finding, which I'm known to do, I had in fact unwittingly, yet nevertheless inexcusably, had not provided what I consider, what anyone in my opinion would consider, a comfortable setting for Ms. Stotler on that occasion to express herself with the proper deference and the latitude which she was entitled to and deserving of, to say the least. So it pains me to go back and look at that, and it kind of calls for me to reassess. And you know, I've reassessed my years of service here, and I don't recall an incident where I, after the fact, looked at it and I said, you know what, that doesn't look right. So I want the record to reflect my firm belief that as a member of this body, I am here to serve as long as I'm here to serve. And as a result, I believe I have an affirmative duty to provide a forum, as I'm sure all of us believe in this duty, to provide the forum to have any matter of concern within our jurisdiction and our domain to be brought before this body without any hesitation by anybody having any matters of concern, and with the confidence that they will be treated with the respect and the due deference and with the requisite comfort to air their concerns or grievances. In my opinion, Ms. Stotler deserved no less than that. I don't believe that she got that from me on December the 9th. That is why I immediately reached out to Ms. Stotler before the year was up, within 24 hours of my review. She was kind enough to return my call. I believe it was New Year's Eve day. And I extended my apology, and she was very gracious. I was very touched by her graciousness in accepting my apology. Of course, I have to say that it goes without saying that we here, as members of this body, in turn, unfortunately or fortunately, it's our call to duty that from time to time we're just going to have to agree to disagree, and we have done that oftentimes. While we as commissioners go about making these tough decisions in the interest of the civil service employees, the various city departments, and the city as a whole. Finally, I'd like to reiterate what I believe to be longstanding vow to be such an agent of service to all civil service employees and to all parties who appear before this commission, regardless of what department or whether they are civil service employee, management, city establishment, or otherwise. I don't distinguish. I have no interests one way or the other than the fairness and justice and the implementation of those principles in the interest of the city of Glendale as a whole. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to clear my conscience and hopefully set the record straight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Gazarian. Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Chair, I have two items under this, just briefly, and I would first and foremost like to introduce a new staff member who's been here a little over a month, but I do want you to know him because you're going to see him here, and he'll have reports and presentations, and that's Sean Chavez. Sean is a newly hired Human Resources Associate. He comes to us by way of Monterey Park. He has a human resources background, and he's hit the ground running. He started here, I believe it was the beginning of December.
November 18th.
November 18th. Time flies. So anyway, I just want to welcome
Welcome
Sean.
aboard.
Welcome. What section are you working in? What?
I'm with Human Resources.
I know, but what?
Human Resources Associate. I'm the analyst assigned to Community Development Department and also the City Clerks.
Very good. Good choice, Mr. Doyle.
And I do want to, again, reintroduce Angela, who you know very well. She used to sit here, and now she's sitting out there. She's been...
Never seen her before.
She's also a Human Resources Associate, and if you look at the the recruitment list, you'll see her name along with Sean and some other folks. So it's good to have a staff that's new, that's energetic, and very, very competent. And so I'm very, very happy to have these folks. One other thing I do want to look at, I'm looking at the scheduling of our next meetings. The February 10th meeting, which we should go on schedule, there's a likelihood that I won't be here, but I'll have someone else sitting in this chair. But the February 24th is the meeting after that, where a number members of my staff will be at a conference. As I've said it before, we don't get out much, but when we do, we like to take advantage of some of these educational opportunities, and this is one that's a employment and labor relations conference, which I will be attending along with Ms. Martin and Ms. Hunanian and I believe Mr. Kwan and a few other members of the staff. So unfortunately, it conflicts with the February 24th commission meeting, so I would anticipate that would be a meeting we'd have to cancel. So.
Very good.
You're taking Russ with you? Good. Good job, Russ. Thank you.
If he's good, if he behaves.
I just wanted to give my condolences, and I think all of our condolences to Matt Doyle. He had a bit of a rough bump, I think, so to speak, last year, and please accept my apologies. I'm sure I speak on behalf of all the commission, all of our condolences to you and your family, and I wish you a better 2016.
All right. Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Okay, next.
Adjournment.
Move
We
to
have a
adjourn.
motion.
Yes.
We are adjourned.